I have 6:06 in the spirit of being timely with my superiors. If you all want to get started, we can. And then as other people come, I'll let them in the room. I'll try to make sure they're muted. Um, I had a little bit of an introduction planned for this particular group. I don't know that I will give it only because, with the exception of maybe Kevin, I spend a considerable amount of time with everybody else on this call, and they uh, probably will admit to that, reluctantly admit to that. But I thank everyone for being here. We are well represented from throughout the district for Peter and Patricia. Just so you know, Dan is our district governor nominee. Coop is our district governor elect. I already explained who Kevin is, and Jenny Jascott is one of our assistant governors down in the southwestern portion of the state. So you've got the four corners of our district very well represented here. And we are going to be recording this call. I'm sure that's part of what leads to the allure of not attending in person, because you can go back and watch the recording at your convenience. But it's the message that matters more to me than it does the size of the audience. I hope that both of you would feel the same way. In talking about peace, and most of you others already know this, what's just rhetorically, when you hear the word peace, it's hard to tell what you think of in this day and age, and what you think of now may be very different from what you thought of 5 years ago. When I hear the word peace, I always wait to hear what suffix is attached to it. Is it peaceful? Is it peaceless? If you ask 10 people what they think of, you probably get at least 10 different answers. But I think there's a couple of things we can all agree on, that there's no such thing as too much peace. And the world that we currently live in could use a lot more than it has. And that's really why I wanted to do this tonight, is not just to talk about peace or the lack thereof in the world in general, but how we can aspire to build peace, not just in the global sense, but right here in our local communities. And so that Patricia and Peter serve as the core of this new team that I have fortunately been asked to become a marginal part of in the peace building efforts, not just within the zones, but in our district as well. And I'm excited about it. And I think if you listen just a little bit tonight, you will leave with a very different definition of peace than the one that you brought with you when you tuned in. So with that said, no further ado, our illustrative director, Peter Kyle, I will turn the mic and the floor over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, District Governor Sean. I'm delighted to be with you all. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. As Sean knows, one of my secret loves is railways and railroads. And West Virginia has the best vintage railroads and rail systems and do with railways. Some years ago, my wife and I did the trip from Huntington to Hinton over the New River Gorge, just a fabulous trip. And I've been to several of the cogwheel, the Cass railways. So once all this Rotary mumbo jumbo is out of the way and I have a little more time, I'll be back into West Virginia. So you're warned, be warned. But just a little bit about myself. I'm from New Zealand. I first came to America in 1973 on a Rotary scholarship. I spent a year at the University of Virginia studying law. And then that was the time of Watergate, a very exciting time for a young lawyer to be in America. Then I went back to New Zealand, got on with my life, got married and mortgaged, joined Rotary, became a partner in a law firm, and all was going along hunky-dory. And then fast forward about 18 years, I got a call from the World Bank in Washington. Would I consider moving to Washington to join the legal department to work on privatization in the Soviet Union and other parts of Eastern Asia, Eastern Europe? In the flash of an eye, I realized that this would be the end of timesheets, partners meetings, practice development meetings. Why hasn't your client paid their damn bills meetings? So after about 3 seconds of quick contemplation, I accepted the offer, and 6 months later, my wife and I and our daughter and our son moved back to Virginia, where I'd been as a student, and joined the World Bank. Fast forward 10 years, my daughter graduated from UVA. Fast forward another 5 years, my son graduated from UVA. And you can imagine my pride as I watched first my daughter, then my son, process down the lawn of Mr. Jefferson's University, as I had done 30 years previously. I retired from the bank in 2009, retired on a Friday, and as is the custom, on the Monday, I went back as a consultant. Same office, same work, same email account. That was the key. And for the next 4 years, I was almost a full-time consultant. I was based in Cairo for 3 months. I was based in Sana'a, Yemen for 3 months. And I traveled very extensively throughout the Middle East and other parts of the world. Finally, the bank put me out to pasture. And that's when I sort of reconnected with Rotary in a big way. Outside of my family and my professional life as a lawyer, my two other main passions in life are Rotary and Outward Bound. I don't know whether you've ever heard of Outward Bound. I think probably most of you have. So I did an Outward Bound course in New Zealand when I was 20. I got involved in the administration and I rose up through the ranks, and eventually I became the chairman of Outward Bound International. I reported to the patron, Prince Philip, the husband of the Queen. Every year I'd go to Buckingham Palace and give a personal update on the status of Outward Bound to Prince Philip. Quite an amazing experience for any colonial from New Zealand. And in my 20s, as I mentioned, I had the scholarship, Rotary scholarship. So Outward Bound and Rotary have been in tandem, my main two extracurricular activities, if you like. And I've often dreamed, how could I in some way bring Outward Bound and Rotary together? Early last year, it all fell into place, courtesy of two amazing Rotary Peace Fellows, one of whom is on the screen, Patricia Schaefer, Chief Executive of New Gen Peacebuilders, vast experience of peace and education in America and outside America. And Anna Patel, another Rotary Peace Fellow, who at that time was the Chief Executive of Outward Bound Peacebuilding. And we had various discussions, and over time, we agreed that this would be a very appropriate time to develop a new initiative, which we're calling Youth and Peace in Action, engaging 100,000 young community peace builders. As we all know, conflict tends to arise locally. So the solutions need to be local community based. And what better organization to be involved in local community based conflict resolution mechanisms than Rotary? And we need to deal with young people. Rotary has always had a strong focus on youth exchange, RILA, Rotaract, Interact. We need to get to our youth before they get, like some of us, too cynical, too jaded, too skeptical. While they're still young and relatively naive, we need to inculcate lessons of peace building and how to deal in society with conflict situations that they will inevitably arise. So we put together this initiative. It's quite ambitious. Actually, before I say anything more about that, Sean asked me to say a little bit about the zones and the directors. Can I just sidetrack Sean for a moment, and because I think that it's important to put this in context.
By all means.
So if you imagine a pyramid, at the base of the pyramid, we have the Rotarians, just under 1.2 million, spread across 200 countries, and territorial jurisdictions. At the next rung of the pyramid ladder, we have the clubs, just over 36,000. Then we have the district governors, of which Sean is an esteemed example, and Dan and Coop are following that esteemed example. There are 535 district governors all around the world. Then we have zones. We have 34 zones, and we are in zones 33 and 34. Each director is responsible for 2 zones. By just an amazing quirk, there are currently 2 directors in zones 33 and 34. I'm sure most of you know Stephanie Urchik, my colleague and comrade and great friend. So I'm halfway through my first year. Stephanie is halfway through her second year. She will finish at the end of June, and I will then follow on my own for 1 more year. And zone 33 and 34 is quite large. It extends from Erie, Pennsylvania in the north, down through the central part of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, all the countries in the Caribbean, except the Dominican Republic, and 3 countries in South America. Approximately 70,000 Rotarians and just under 1,800 Rotary clubs. So it's quite a big jurisdiction. The board meets, used to meet before COVID-19, we would meet 4 times a year. Now, because of the technology, we're meeting almost every month, which is quite a lot. And in between, there are committee meetings and so on. The board is the policy-making entity for Rotary International. It's chaired by the president and the president-elect. Current president is Holger Nack from Hamburg in Germany, and he will be followed by Shekhar Mehta from Calcutta in India, and then, drum roll, be followed by Jennifer Jones from Windsor, Ontario, the first female president. And the whole Rotary world is excited about Jennifer's selection. If you haven't met her, I hope you meet her. Fantastic role model, very good speaker, very articulate, very smart, and she's going to be a breath of fresh air. And I think a great fillip for increasing female membership in Rotary and encouraging females to move up the Rotary ladder into leadership positions. Lots of exciting things happening in the Rotary world. So that's the diversion on Rotary. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I'm happy to answer questions later on. I want to get back to the initiative. As Sean mentioned, we need a lot more peace and unity. The world is very divided, and the United States is particularly divided. But I've long felt that Rotary and Rotarians have not just the capability, but have a responsibility to do what we can to bridge the gaps. And we need to reach out more intentionally to school superintendents and the law enforcement community and the faith community and civic leaders and engage more often and more deeply, bringing the skills that we bear, the resources that we have, our brand, our experience. And there are many such peace-building initiatives around the world. The one that I'm promoting with the help of Patricia and Anna, I think I'm quite excited about. We've got tremendous buy-in. There are 31 districts in our 2 zones. So far, we have 22 districts on board, and they've each made a significant financial contribution towards the startup of this initiative. And we hope that they will increase their commitment, and Patricia will get into those details. So we hope to fine-tune the initiative over the next few months and roll it out formally on the 1st of July next year. So I think perhaps that's enough by way of introduction. I'm delighted that Patricia's on the line. She is the brains behind this initiative. She has been heavily involved, as I mentioned before, in peace and education initiatives, particularly in Texas, but other parts of America and overseas. And she brings a wealth of experience And the fact that she's a Rotary Peace Fellow, she's a Paul Harris Fellow, she's a member of the Rotary Club of Charlotte, and she has many other qualifications and distinctions. So without any more, let me pass over to Patricia.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Sean. There are a couple things that the both of you said. First of all, I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. And sort of late last year, Peter and I had a chance to be with some of the leaders in your district, a small group. And I remember it was really, really intimate, and it was a great conversation, and there were great questions. So it's really great to be back with you and to have, this sort of luxury of time to talk to you in even more depth about some of the things Peter was mentioning. I also think it's really special, it's auspicious to be with you tonight, because this is only 2 days after the first day of Peacebuilding and Conflict Resolution Month beginning within Rotary. And on Monday, Peter and I had a chance to talk for about 25, 30 minutes, along with Anna Patel, to do a zone update on the program. And it really is time for an update, because there are a lot of exciting things that, as Peter said, have been happening and are coming down the pike. What really interests me about what Sean said is, when you hear the word peace, there are all kinds of interpretations, and the word is used in so many different ways. Peaceful, is a society peaceful? Is it peaceful and resilient? And I always think about, well, what does that really mean? And perhaps that's the big challenge with peace building, is that it's that thing that we all want. We all want more peaceful societies, and people on the planet who don't want it. I even often say that even those people who seem to be most conflict oriented or violent about things, sometimes it's because they want peace. They just want it on their terms. So whose terms are we talking about peace on? And so I think that was a perfect introduction, Sean, to talk a little bit about the Youth Peace and Action Initiative. In a second, I'm going to take a second here just to share my screen, because there are a few slides that I want to show you just to help with the discussion. And so let's see. Okay, how's it looking? Have you got it on your end? Are you getting it?
Not yet.
All right. Well, we know Sean has a backup just in case, right, Sean? All right. We're all set up. It should work pretty darn seamlessly. Okay, still not getting it?
Oh, man.
All right, you want to try it on your end, Sean? Okay, so we sent Sean a backup just because I was having a few tech issues tonight. Were you able to call it up, Sean? Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. See, that's why the team was prepared just for this very issue and opportunity. Okay, so obviously Peter has given me the chance to provide a little more detail to you about the Youth Peace and Action Initiative and where it stands. And so the moniker that we always like to use is Youth and Peace and Action Engaging 100,000 Young Community Peace Builders, which is really quite a phenomenal thing to say. The fact that Rotary has 1.2 million members, has peace as an area of focus, as Peter often says, 100-year history of advocating for peace. Rotary is the only organization on the planet that has something called the Rotary Peace Fellows, where about between 80 and 110 Rotary Peace Fellows are selected each year, either to go through a master's program or a professional development program. And it was great to hear Sean mention your Rotary Peace Fellow chair for the district, because that's always a tremendous thing to have in place. But to be able to say that there is a footprint that Rotary has, and an area of focus that Rotary has, and this tremendous network of Rotary Peace Fellows that Rotary has, and a system of Rotary Peace Fellow chairs that Rotary has, and a tremendous footprint with young people, and to be able to talk about putting that all together and creating an initiative across 2 zones, zones 33 and 34, dedicated to peace education with young people, is a rarity. And I remember a day when I heard Peter about 2 years ago first speak of this idea as the past chair for the Peace Centers for Rotary, and think about how it would be possible to take some of these ideas of what Rotary Peace Fellows are, but bring it to the community level so that communities themselves can be supporting young peace builders, and that zones 33, 34 could be a model. I just, remember sort of being on cloud nine about the possibility, and being on cloud nine about the possibility that peace builders could be trained from the community level up. So that was really exciting. And the initiative, as Peter said, is going to officially be underway later this summer, but we'll be equipping districts and Rotarians with tools and templates that they can use starting March 1st. And we're spending this month just continuing to talk to everybody about the opportunity. So Sean. Could we move to the next slide, since you're in control? Thanks. So it seems for me a little funny to be showing you these couple of photos, but the previous one is just a reminder of how my own Rotary Peace Fellow journey began. I was invited to be a Rotary Peace Fellow because, as you can see from this photo, I don't just do New Gen Peace Builders now. At the time I was invited to be a Rotary Peace Fellow, I was running a nonprofit that actually builds schools and trains teachers in several countries in East Africa that are unfortunately often associated with conflict. So the countries that I concentrate my work in, and the organization that I'm with concentrates our work in, are Rwanda, Uganda, and South Sudan. 3 countries that all, when you say the names of the countries, unfortunately, for many people who are familiar with that part of the world, it reads as conflict. Now, there is good reason for that. For instance, in South Sudan, where we do a lot of work with several flagship projects, it is not uncommon for me to be visiting there and working with colleagues and working at the schools where we have built schools or trained teachers, where some very dramatic things can happen in a moment, in the blink of an eye. This is actually one of the magical moments. There are many magical moments when you do this kind of work too. And this photo was actually taken in a place called Old Fangak, which is in an area that is often referred to as the last opposition territory in South Sudan. And it was a little town of a village of a couple of thousand people at one point. But in the last few years, it's actually become, they still call it a village, but it has 40,000 people, and they are all displaced people because of 2 civil wars that have occurred just in the last 10 years when I have been working there. Now, the magical moments are when this fellow, he will, every time I'm in the village, he comes up with his soup can and wants to have a conversation with me. So he's playing telephone. And this must be some sort of universal game. I certainly played it when I was a child. And he speaks Nuer, and he chatters away, and he tells me his stories, and I have absolutely no idea what he's saying. But it's a grand old time. It's a magical experience. But at the same time, in this village, just before COVID-19 broke out, I was there and contracted typhoid. And I've never had that experience in East Africa, but I contracted typhoid. I got quite sick. I debated staying in country because I had so much work to do. And I was told by my doctor at home, no, COVID-19 has just broken out and you really, really need to come home because they're going to start, stopping planes and you won't be able to get out. And in a place like South Sudan, there are only 4 ventilators in the entire country for 12 million people. So with regret, but understanding, I came home. And came home obviously to the challenges that we've been living through for the last several months. And I hope to be back there in a couple of months, vaccine or no vaccine. But the reason this photo I like is exactly what Sean said. Sean said, what is peace? How do you define it? What if you interpret it differently than I interpret it differently? And I interpret it. And I always think peace is, it's true that peace and a picture of peace is kind of worth 1,000 words. So for me, that's this photo. But I also want to show you another photo that for me means peace. And I was telling Sean the other day that since I've come to know him better and been getting to know your district, it really takes me back to an experience I had in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. So I was telling Sean that because I've had the chance to interact with him and more conversations with you, I remember that one of the most peaceful experiences I've ever had in my life was when I was taking a leadership course. It was a week-long leadership course in Harper's Ferry. And it was so beautiful and so peaceful. And the whole idea of the leadership course was to shut yourself off from anyone else, shut yourself off from television, shut yourself off from phones, and really practice being in a space of peace. And so I just thought, oh my goodness, that photo in South Sudan is important to me, but a photo that recalls one of the most peaceful weeks I've ever had is important to me too. And so I wanted to share those two photos because for me, both of them are about peace. And certainly as a Rotary Peace Fellow, you're often asked, well, what do you mean by peace? How do you go about it? What are your approaches? How do you know if you've had any success? And what about the fact that, as Sean and Peter said, there are all kinds of signs that we've actually devolved in terms of peace in the United States in the last, since 2006, the data shows peace has been declining in the United States, primarily because of, here's the drum roll, as the CEO of the Institute for Economics and Peace, who's a partner to Rotary, that organization is a strategic partner to Rotary, would say, factionalized elites and leaders have been unable, or they have refused to find common ground. And to the extent that they will not find common ground, it sets a tone in the United States. And as the United States sets a tone, it sets a tone for the world. So thank you for letting me show that photo, Sean. So now a little bit about Youth Peace in Action, kind of in detail. And I love the photo with the train because Peter said he loves trains so much and loves the train experience in West Virginia. And that's totally coincidental, I would like to say. So, all right, so this Rotary Youth Peace in Action in zones 33 and 34, as Peter envisioned a couple of years ago, it's really designed to model and scale the ability to bring peace education to our local communities. And what's exciting about our zones is, large, very diverse geography, 110 million people in the zones just in the United States, but if you count the Caribbean, although I heard Peter say, except Dominican Republic tonight, which was a great reminder, and 3 countries in South America, it's 150 million people, 65,000 Rotarians. The capital is in our zones where there are some peace-oriented organizations that are key partners to Rotary. The UNC and Duke Peace Centers are in North Carolina in our zones. And Peter mentioned I've done work in Texas. Yes, I have, but I am based in North Carolina. And so I am in the zones, smack dab in the zones. The whole zones, zone 33 and 34 has this tremendous number of students in schools and high schools. There are only 2 other places in the country that you could say have, larger numbers of concentrated students. That would be Texas and California, but those are individual states. It's not a large, diverse region like ours. There are some very notable peace activities and events that have already been underway by Rotarians throughout the zones. So Youth Peace in Action is an amazing visionary initiative, but this is not to say that there aren't tremendous things that have already been underway. Now notice I have put a big red circle on West Virginia, and this has been something really wonderful as we have been shaping this program with Peter since July 2020. I now say that the program is really being shaped by about 200 people. We just have the pleasure of being implementing partners as Rotary Peace Fellows on this. But now there are so many district governors and district governor-elects and people who have been identified as peace chairs, who have been engaging, offering advice, shaping the program, and so on. And I just really want to give a shout out. And if you start blushing, Sean, I can't control that. But I want to give a shout out to Sean and the team that you have there, because we have learned so much and see such tremendous opportunity in partnering with West Virginia, and West Virginia being one of the models for the zones. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment. So big circle on West Virginia. I should have just put a heart, not a circle. All right. So yeah. So what is the whole premise of the Youth Peace in Action initiative? It really starts with the idea that the idea of a culture of peace and crafting a culture of peace is really language that's only been around for about 5 years, believe it or not. It seems like it must be, millenniums old, millennial, there we go, the plural of millennial old, but it's not. It's a new program that has really only been really part of peace building vocabulary and vernacular since about 2015. And the premise is that if you want a culture of peace, you have to engage in peace education. And if you want to engage in peace education, you have to engage young people at critical points in their lives. And not just engage them in doing good things and practicing being a good neighbor, which of course are essential, but you have to engage them in learning how to think of peace as a process and a way of solving problems. Okay, peace as a process and way of solving problems. Demographically speaking, young people between the ages of 14 and 24 are the world's largest population, subpopulation, percentage of the population. And that demographic is expected to keep growing like this till about 2040 and then start to tail off, okay? And so the wisdom goes, the thinking goes, engage with these young people now, because if we do, then there will be a peace dividend. If we miss the window, it's a lost opportunity. And then last but not least, US youth are in a premier position to inspire and lead others. If you talk to young people, which I get to do in other countries around the world, they see youth in the United States as often their role models. And as these youth go, they follow. So how critical to think about engaging with young people in our communities, but know that as they go, so goes the world. Sort of as our patterns in peace go, so goes the world. That's the sort of premise of what we're up to. Yeah, and so I thought it would be really interesting to take about 4 minutes to show you a video, because again, people always say, well, what is peace? And if you say you're engaging with young people to do peace, to learn peace, to see peace as a way of a process and a way of solving problems, and ultimately to produce peace projects in our communities, then what does that look like? I've had the good pleasure since 2014 to engage with young people and help develop peace projects of all kinds. You name the topic, there's been a peace project about it. Some big, some small, some international, some many, 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 many local. But I thought this one was interesting because it really is about seeing peace in a very different way, but there's almost no community in the United States that couldn't see the potential of a peace project like this. So Sean, if you would give us a chance to see that, that would be great.
Well, maybe.
Well, maybe.
I click play, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
Well, you know what you can do is we can make sure if it's not cooperating with you, what we'll do is we'll put it in a link and send it to you, and you could all have a chance to look at it.
Great.
In brief, it's a peace project called Foster the Future. And it was actually initiated by a group of young people, 25 young people who are working on one team. And what they saw was a tremendous number of young people in their community that are living in foster care. And they saw the connections between living in foster care and feeling unsettled and not having a sense of peace in your life. And then it turned out that one of the young people in that team and his brother were actually living in foster care, but none of these students on the team knew that. So the project really was about these young people learning statistics about youth in foster care, learning how to engage with the local court system, seeing if there was a project that they could do, teaming up with Rotarians and doing a project about serving young people in foster care. And so we'll make sure that you get a link to watch that.
I tried to
Okay.
go back out and come in, and maybe it's because the PowerPoint is in the Dropbox. It won't sync up to that video. I don't know, but I apologize for that.
No worries, no worries. And we'll send you a link. What's interesting though about the project also is that it was done in California, but then when we showed it in Virginia and West Virginia, young people really resonated with it. I've shown it in North Carolina. I've shown it outside the United States. And what you start to see with Youth Peace in Action is the idea that young people can create their own peace projects guided by mentors, trained mentors like Rotarians. And then when they do them and you show them, we call it build peace, repeat the peace. You know, you can learn from that project and repeat, you know, many projects of a similar nature in many different communities. So we'll make sure that gets to you, and maybe a couple of other samples. All right, so Sean. So Youth Peace in Action, just to sort of, you know, cut to the chase on the basic structure of it, you know, how do you engage 100,000 young people in zones 33, 34? The project with all of this, the initiative with all this input from so many people has now really boiled down to 3 components or 3 phases. The first one, as Peter mentioned, is essentially complete. So it was 22 of 31 districts supporting the planning, development, you know, hard thinking about how you actually bring youth peace education across a number of districts, working with Rotarians in the zones. And so that early planning is complete. The second phase is equip, which in some ways I almost feel like it's starting now because we're doing wonderful presentations like this with you tonight. And of course we can talk about it and have questions and answers. But starting March 1, we want to be working with and engaging with those districts who are very interested in the idea of Youth Peace in Action, and making sure that we're supporting a working committee that they're putting into place. We're providing templates and tools that make it easy to talk to superintendents in schools, teachers in schools, the communities about the initiative that Rotary is undertaking. And then the big kahuna, the big part of it, is really starting in September 2021 through June 2022. And it's educate in one big phase. And that big phase is working to bring kind of the new gen Peacebuilder experience to high schools, specifically service clubs, including Interact, and letting students at the community level go through the training and certification process. You can see under educate there's some pretty big numbers that we're talking about. And so you can be on a path to getting to 100,000 young people if we have a number of districts involved. And the certification process, the training and certification, is available to many, many students in each district. There's also a professional development component for teachers. The reason I just want to be really clear about that is it's possible that because many teachers like to be trained in the summer, some teachers could get trained this summer, and many teachers at the high school level might get trained in the following summer. I'm often asked, do teachers really want to learn peace education? And what we found is if you bring peace education alongside what teachers are already teaching, and they're the masters in their classrooms, whether they're teaching social studies or US history or environment, they are very, very, very eager to receive that kind of training and support. And I have a little surprise up my sleeve about that in a second. So that is a path to getting to engaging 100,000 young people with Rotarians working together to do that, along with Peter and us as implementing partners. And so this also was not planned, that Peter would say he loves trains, that you would see trains in Harper's Ferry, and that I would produce this closing slide. And so this closing slide is really something we even said Monday, February 1st at that zones 33, 34 monthly information update. It's on the one hand, we're really kicking off March 1, and we need to be kicking off March 1 because of course, reaching out to superintendents, reaching out to schools, getting communities excited about next year has to start this spring. And what I said on Monday is, and if you want to know sort of who the leaders are, who are engaged, asking questions, taking the lead, helping move things forward already, there are 4 districts that I gave a shout out to. Now, we've had full expressions of interest from 16 or more districts, but my shout out on Monday was to District 6900, which is in Georgia and includes Atlanta, 6960 and 6930 in Florida. And does anybody recognize that other number? 7545. And the reason I said that is because we've had just such lovely conversations already, including Sean introduced us to the gentleman, Dustin Lambert, who heads social studies coordination and instruction for all of West Virginia. And he's a lovely guy. We had a long, long call after Sean had already spoken to him. I learned so much about when the social studies cycle changes in West Virginia, how teachers get access to content they might be interested in. And Dustin was very enthusiastic about this opportunity being possibly available in West Virginia, and said that the high school teachers, social studies teachers in West Virginia would probably value this greatly. And he's in a position to make it known to them that it could be available with the support of Rotary in the district. So I think that sort of wraps up the presentation. And obviously the idea is about all being together on the peace train in zones 33 and 34. So thank you for your listening.
You were both too kind about giving me and or this district credit for being on the train. I admit that we're under it. I don't know that we're driving it, but we're on it. And I'm glad to be part of it. And as I shared with Patricia just recently, that some of the commitments are financial as well. And Coop was glad to throw his hat in the ring as my successor for 2021-22, and be right alongside me with the commitment, not only financially, but I've shared with both of you, and everybody else on this call already knows that 7545 is very much in the culture building stage of its existence. You talk about those districts in Georgia and Florida, and I don't know how long they've been around, but this is our 19th month in existence. So while you've got a lot of blank slate in order to be able to start drafting the future on, you don't have a lot of historic elements to build on. So we are very much in the culture building stage. And I think that this Youth and Peace in Action and just peace in general is a fantastic opportunity to be doing that. And I'm on the train, Coop's on the train. I think everybody on this call wouldn't be here unless they were at least interested in where that train's going. It's going to be my job and Coop's and our district chair and the committee that we're in the process of forming now to gather as many people to get on this train with us as we can. And with that said, I thank you both. If anybody's got any questions for either Peter or Patricia, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Well, I'd like to ask Peter, in the vision of where you'd like to take this, looking beyond just zone 33, 34, where would you like to see this go if it catches on, as we'd all hope?
Well, I think this is absolutely replicable throughout all the zones in North America. I have very close contact with other zones, with other directors. We need to prove that this initiative works. So it'll take a year or two. I think the first year we'll be developing the tools, the equipment, the curricula and so on. Once that is pretty much settled, then the cost of rolling it out in subsequent years will be much less. And as I say, I would hope that we can make this available throughout North America. I'm really convinced that this is a significant initiative. I think, as I said before, we really need peace and unity, and we need to get our young people to embrace peace and unity concepts. And I think the experience that Patricia has had in other parts of America has demonstrated that there's a thirst for exactly this type of program. So
I'll share a story with you. And it's in the context of don't limit your vision. I think even limiting it to the US is limiting it. My story has to do with my experience in scouting and my military background, which is 38 years serving in the military. And I always felt for the longest time that the issue of terrorism and the peace structures and difficulties we're having today are not to be solved by conversations with the current incumbents. You have to skip a generation and get to the youth and have that conversation with the youth. And the story I wanted to share with you is an experience I had at a World Scout Jamboree in 2010. It was held in Chelmsford, England. It was the 100th anniversary of Scouting, which of course was a product of the United Kingdom. And I made a habit while I was there for that World Jamboree of talking to individual scouts each day and just kind of getting a feel for, you know, what do you feel? Why are you here? What are you experiencing at this Jamboree? And one morning I had a conversation with a young scout from South Africa. And when I asked him the question, he sat for a few moments and said, you know, it's that being Black here doesn't matter. And it struck me at the time that it reinforced my belief that this skipping a generation is so key. So, and I couldn't agree more with the framework of what you're trying to do here. I'm certainly supportive of it. I think it's critical that we do it. I'm delighted that we're doing it in our zone. But again, I think there's an opportunity far greater than just what we're experiencing. I hope we keep that in mind as we proceed.
Well, thank you, Dan. You won't get any opposition either from Patricia or myself. We would love to expand it, but we do need to be grounded. We need to get this through the first year or two and then see where we go. And Patricia, as she mentioned, has had some amazing experience in South Sudan and Uganda, and she's involved with other parts, Lebanon and other parts of the world. This is a life journey for Patricia. We're just starting. But thank you for your comments and thank you for your story.
You know, it kind of sounds like you got another year's worth of commitment from district leadership in 7545.
Excellent.
You know, Dan is fresh out of his first gets, and his head is still a spin, I'm sure, from that experience. So I didn't want to exactly pile on him and say, okay, Dan, Coop and I are in, no pressure, no pressure. So that was completely unsolicited and refreshing to hear. And I couldn't feel more comfortable about knowing where this district is going when I too am put out to pasture like you have been, Mr. Director. But does anybody else have any questions for either of our esteemed presenters? If not, I actually have a surprise for at least some of you, if maybe not all of you. And I think that's going to be delivered by our district membership chair, Rebecca Hunn. Not to put you on the spot, but I think you're kind of prepared for this. Are you not, Becky? And you'll have to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah. We want to establish a peace-based club. There are 3 people on this call who are part of the Innovative Clubs Committee. Dan and I were on a call today about establishing another group. Ginny is a new member, and I apologize for my lighting. My indoor greenhouse, the lights just timed off, so I'm kind of in the dark here. We want to do a peace club, and some other districts have done it. And I will say this, and I think Dan will agree with me. We are in a heavy learning curve. We go forward, find out that's not, and we haven't tried the peace initiative yet. That's one that is on our list. We're learning, and all districts are learning when it comes to cause-based clubs. But what you've said today gives me some new perspective and some new thoughts. And I do know this, we have to find the person, be they Rotarian or non-Rotarian. We can give a non-Rotarian a lot of support. We have to find the person who will be the spark. And we have to find a focus in establishing these new clubs. Our first thought was, you put together some people interested in the same thing and let them define what they're going to do. If we have discovered that's too broad. There has to be a starting point to get it started. So, finding that person who is already honed in for whatever reason on peace is very important. And that's step one. And, I'm throwing that out here. And to anybody who watches the recording who is in our district, to please think about that. Those people are out there. They may already have, be engaged in some way. They're there. We need to know who they are. Because once we get that person, then we can build around them. We can offer a lot of support. There are endless projects that could be done, but it is on our radar. It is something we want to do. There are a couple of other districts that have done it, and I think they have tied in to some of the universities that have peace initiatives. So we're headed that way. It's kind of, you can only do so many things at once, and there are a few things ahead of that. But it needs to be done. It's not something we're ignoring. But so that's step one. Find that person who's passionate about the cause, who is in our district, Rotarian or non-Rotarian, and we will build around them and give them the support that they need.
Great.
Oh, go ahead, Peter.
No.
All right. So may I say, as a Rotary Peace Fellow, that is incredible news that you would think about that way in your district. And may I also say, I didn't mention it at the beginning of the talk, but I am a Rotary Positive Peace Activator, which means there are about 30 of us in the U.S. who are supposed to support Rotarians in furthering their desires to be conveners and connectors of peace in their communities. That binds me in terms of being of service to you, if I can, if there's any way that I could support your initiative in that direction. And what's really beautiful about what you've said is really good peace education with young people takes place in a context where the adults around them are allies who are kind of on the, sorry for the pun, on the peace train too. So I think what you just said is electric. So, congratulations. That's very inspiring.
Well, thank you. And we may call on you.
Sorry, Peter?
No, I echo everything that Patricia said. Kevin, did you want to chip in?
Well, I did, and I first want to say thank you for allowing me to join this meeting. This is the first one I've joined, and I have to say there's probably a reason I did. The topic, the conversation, what was discussed tonight. Rebecca, I don't know that I'm that person, but I can tell you whoever that person is, I will support them 100%. I've spent the last 25 years, working in schools, working with at-risk kids, not as a teacher, but from somebody from the outside, working with at-risk kids, helping kids come together. And I do believe it. It's not going to happen with my generation. It's going to happen with those kids in that middle school and those early childhood right now. If we can really just create something to embrace them and show them what could be, and then let them drive this thing, equip them to drive it. So I just wanted to briefly say, because I know you got a 7 o'clock Zoom, Peter, that I want to thank you for letting me come here tonight. This is something I'm very, very interested and passionate about, and I just want to say thank you, and I support you 100%.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's great.
Well, then, in true Rotary fashion, Kevin, don't miss a meeting or we'll make you the leader.
I'm seeing a spark.
Yeah, we'll miss.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to contribute to the conversation? I can't thank these two enough. And I would almost apologize for the size of the audience, but there's great benefit in quality as opposed to just blind quantity. And I knew that the people that would tune into this were the ones that would be most receptive to the idea. And as Patricia and I discussed just a couple days ago, you've got to start somewhere. If there were just two of us on this call, as long as it led us in the right direction, it would have been worth its weight in gold for the hour that we spent together. So we've got 8 times as many as that. And, you know, we're learning things about each other. And I said earlier, I spend a lot of my time with most of these people, and I've learned new things about some of them that I didn't know before. And I'm encouraged to fully exploit that to whatever degree necessary moving forward.
Sean, this has been great. I do have
Yeah,
to
thank you.
thank you very much. Thank
Understood.
you for being such an attentive audience. Thank you for the support that you've demonstrated and voiced for the YPA initiative. Thank you, Patricia, for yet another outstanding presentation. I wish you all well as you continue your Rotary journeys, and I hope to join you on both the Peace Train and a West Virginia train at some point.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.